The Galactic Senate's Grand Convocation Hall spanned nearly half a kilometer in diameter, a domed wonder of shimmering alloys and interwoven architectural styles drawn from dozens of star systems. Under that colossal vault of engineered crystal, ambassadors and senators of over 200 species mingled, their voices overlapping in a cacophony of tongues that only the specialized translation devices could parse. On a typical day, the chamber thrived with polite debate, negotiation, and occasional friction. Today, however, the tension rose to a level rarely seen in the Senate's history. Word of a military disaster had spread with astonishing speed, and the assembled delegates now wore expressions ranging from perplexity to alarm. In the center of the circular space, perched on a levitating platform shaped like a wide disk, stood senior diplomat Vorex Tazarak of the Silver Federation. He was tall and slender, with pale lavender skin and four forearms that twitched whenever he felt under duress. Despite his formal robes and the sense of dignity they conferred, Vorex looked visibly uneasy as he tapped through the data on his handheld. Behind him, an array of holographic screens floated in midair, each revealing chaotic images from a recent assault. The subject of these recordings was Earth, a planet of modest interstellar presence, and a civilization classified as Level 2 on the Senate's technological scale. No one had ever considered humans a significant threat, until now. Vorex's gaze swept the crowd, and his voice emerged amplified for all to hear. "Honorable senators and esteemed representatives," he began, "I come before you with unsettling news regarding an incident involving the Krovac Dominion's flagship, the Pride of Cantor. As many of you have heard, that battle cruiser suffered catastrophic losses in an encounter with human civilians." The final phrase brought murmurs from the entire assembly. The Pride of Cantor was renowned for its formidable weaponry and 2,000 elite warriors, each one trained to near perfection in boarding assaults. The idea that everyday humans, particularly older tourists, had overwhelmed such a ship bordered on the absurd. To lend weight to his words, Vorex signaled the holograms to display the relevant footage. A pair of shaky recordings flickered to life. One showed an older human male, white-haired and stooped, gripping a simple projectile weapon, apparently reloading it behind an upended table. Another frame captured a gray-haired woman in plain clothing pouring chemical solutions from housekeeping bottles into improvised containers. Then came scenes of Krovac soldiers sprawled on the deck, their advanced armor partly melted or caught in tripwire traps that had been rigged in ventilation ducts. The entire fiasco had left the crow-like aliens in full retreat. The final shot froze on the face of the older man who, according to the data displayed, had personally downed 17 Krovac soldiers. At once, the hall erupted in heated conversation. Senator Kassax of the Regelian Empire, a tall reptilian figure with scaled ridges running down her neck, stepped forward. "This is preposterous. Krovac warriors are lethal even by the standards of the most advanced militaries. How could mere tourists, humans who were, I believe, on a recreational voyage, inflict this level of carnage? Are the recordings falsified?" she asked, her eyes narrowed. Vorex swallowed. "We have verified the source. The data is authentic. Additionally, our own intelligence cross-referenced the identifications of those humans. They are retirees traveling for leisure. Yet they utilized a combination of primitive firearms and improvised explosives to secure multiple sections of the Pride of Cantor. The Krovac were forced to evacuate, and in the aftermath, these same humans commandeered the cruiser, at least temporarily. It appears they used basic engineering knowledge to operate or disable critical systems, enough to strong-arm the Krovac into surrender." The noise in the hall mounted again. Some called it a fluke. Others insisted it was only the tip of a more ominous iceberg. Evidently, no one was certain. But suspicion grew, and the Senate promptly dispatched investigators. The meeting concluded with an urgent resolution: gather more intelligence on human engagements with other belligerents and compile a thorough threat assessment. There was more at stake than the embarrassment of the Krovac Dominion. If Earth's civilians truly posed a hidden danger, The entire galaxy had reason to reconsider Earth's classification. Director Vaznik of the Intergalactic Threat Assessment Division was the individual first entrusted with the deeper investigation. Tall for an Andorian, his mottled blue skin made him stand out among his subordinates. Vaznik was known for his calm, methodical approach, but the events on the Pride of Cantor had rattled even him. Like everyone else, he had always considered Earth a minor player. Indeed, humans had only discovered faster-than-light travel a few centuries prior, and their vessels remained clumsy compared to the elegant warp drives used by older civilizations. Conventional wisdom deemed them little more than a curiosity. Now, though, Vaznik's usual certainty wavered. He studied the preliminary reports, including one detailing another fiasco, an attempted strike by the notorious Crimson Talon mercenaries against a terrestrial settlement, known as Anchorage in a region called Alaska. Anchorage was not a major city, nor was it heavily militarized. It was remote, cold, with harsh weather conditions. Nevertheless, upon landing, the heavily armed mercenaries found themselves in a lethal trap. Local inhabitants, hunters, volunteer defenders, and people used to sub-zero climates picked them off with precise gunfire, often from distances well beyond what the Crimson Talons anticipated. On footage gleaned from the mercenaries' own helmet cams, it was painfully clear that the attackers had no idea how to deal with the environment. They trudged clumsily through snowdrifts, cursing as they tried to maintain a formation that made sense in other star systems but proved disastrous there. Meanwhile, hidden marksmen took them out one by one. The end result was a total rout. Anchorage had evacuated its most vulnerable citizens ahead of time, so the mercenaries came up empty in terms of hostages or resources. Worse, they sustained a casualty rate near 73% before they could even scramble back to their landing craft. The fiasco brought shame upon the Crimson Talon, who had toppled entire planetary governments in the past. Why, then, had they failed so miserably against a scattering of local volunteers? Vaznik asked that very question in a briefing with his intelligence officer, Riz Paktu, a wiry figure from a species with delicate, chitin-like plating. Paktu displayed multiple holograms in front of her director. For what we can tell, she said, the people of Anchorage simply adapted. Many of them are adept at hunting moose, bears, and other large predators. They're used to reading footprints on snowy terrain and ambushing animals with rifles. Their firearms may be primitive, chemical projectiles propelled by gunpowder, yet in skilled hands, these rifles remain lethal. The Crimson Talon approached with energy weapons that function best in stable conditions. Once the scopes or the thermal imaging equipment shorted out in the extreme cold, their technological edge vanished. Vaznik frowned, tinting his fingers. It's not simply about rifles in the snow, though, he said. There must be a deeper reason these so-called civilians organized so effectively. Are we sure they had no advanced training, no special forces among them? We found no records of formal training or ex-military background among the defenders, Paktu said. Of course, a few might have served in local Earth-based forces decades ago, but the majority appear to be regular citizens, hunters, enthusiasts, survivalists. Additionally, once they learned the Crimson Talons were landing, they set up a communications network using old radio frequencies, unencrypted but functional in the region's harsh electromagnetic conditions. They basically improvised an early warning system. Every approach route to Anchorage was watched, and as soon as the mercenaries moved, the defenders responded instantly. Sighing, Vaznik swiped a hand across the holographic display. This is reminiscent of that fiasco on the Pride of Cantor. Improvised solutions, quick organization, and an uncanny ability to target weaknesses in seemingly superior foes. He paused a moment to digest the full meaning. I want to see more examples. Show me everything we have on human engagements outside Earth's atmosphere. Paktu nodded. The next major incident took place aboard Space Habitat Delta 9, a ring-shaped research facility in orbit around Earth. The Vexcar Dominion decided to seize it to gain access to experimental quantum computing technology. They expected minimal resistance beyond the standard station guards. Instead, they encountered a crew of engineers and scientists who fought with a level of cunning that surprised everyone. Footage popped up of the Vexgar infiltration team moving stealthily through the station's corridors. They wore sleek, dark armor designed to deflect small arms fire. But as the infiltration progressed, airlocks started to seal off, and lights flickered in carefully orchestrated patterns. Ambient temperatures rose in some compartments, fell drastically in others, and hissing steam from broken pipes created a nightmare of zero-visibility conditions. The Vexgar commandos, uncertain which systems might be compromised, began to split up. That was when the defenders struck. They had armed themselves with maintenance tools, basic firearms, and a knowledge of exactly how every corridor, hatch, and subsystem of the station connected. Despite lacking formal combat training, the station crew knew the facility inside and out. They turned each corridor into a kill zone or a place to launch ambushes. When the infiltration unit tried to cut power to essential sectors, the humans switched to backup systems. That chain of fallback resources included older technology that required manual inputs rather than sophisticated electronics, thus bypassing the Dominion's sabotage attempts. In the end, the Vexgar team lost over half its number, and the survivors fled. Once again, a group of civilians had triumphed. To Vaznik, it felt like the same pattern repeating with slight variations. What, he wondered, was happening on Earth to create people who reacted like this under stress? He tasked one of his top analysts, a cultural anthropologist named Jella Navarro, to delve into human entertainment media and historical records. Jella was a small, furry pro-ion, her large round ears constantly twitching as she consumed reams of data about Earth. She had a calm, scholarly demeanor, but as she sifted through everything from human war histories to children's games, she began to suspect the galaxy had fundamentally misunderstood the Terran psyche. She requested a meeting with Vaznik to present her findings. The director ushered her into his office, which looked more like a high-tech war room than a space for quiet contemplation. Holographic displays glowed from every wall, each showing a different scenario involving humans. Jella carried a portable holo-tablet and began her presentation. A swirl of quick video clips filled the air, scenes from Earth movies featuring alien invasions, robot rebellions, zombie outbreaks, and heroic feats by ordinary citizens. Then came footage of large-scale online shooter games, where massive numbers of humans, often children or teenagers, practiced simulated warfare daily. "You see, Director," Jella said, flipping to a dramatic montage of paintball skirmishes, "they do this for fun. They have entire industries built around simulating combat. Everything from historical reenactments of ancient battles to advanced digital games that replicate modern or futuristic warfare. Even their sports sometimes involve physical confrontation and strategic team play. It appears humans have collectively gamified conflict." Vaznik frowned. "You're saying they have grown accustomed to constant mental drills for crisis scenarios, even if unconsciously?" "Precisely," Jella said. "They call it entertainment, but in effect it's training. The repeated themes of survival against impossible odds, whether from imaginary monsters or malevolent invasions, instill an almost reflexive readiness to improvise under threat. Their fictional media encourages the notion that a single determined individual or a small group can overcome an entire army with clever tactics and sheer willpower. We're calling it the Die Hard paradigm, referencing a particularly influential franchise that revolves around an ordinary protagonist fighting off well-armed terrorists. But that's only one example among thousands." "And their children?" Vaznik asked. "They start young," Jella replied, "playing games like hide-and-seek, capture the flag, and dodgeball. These appear harmless, but each fosters a fundamental skill set: stealth, evasion, teamwork, accuracy. When they get older, it's first-person shooter video games, airsoft matches, paintball tournaments, tactical board games, you name it. Meanwhile, they're bombarded by films and series that Leoneize the plucky underdog hero. By the time they reach adulthood, many humans have mentally rehearsed countless combat or survival scenarios without even realizing it. Vaznik absorbed the explanation in stunned silence. His entire worldview shifted. If Jella was correct, then Earth's classification as Level 2 was dangerously misleading. Their technology might be behind, but their collective readiness for conflict was on par with more advanced species. He realized this had to go before the Galactic Senate's Military Affairs Committee, which was precisely what happened next. A few days later, amid an even more crowded convocation, a hush fell as the committee convened. Delegates and officers from numerous alliances took their seats. Fleet Marshal Gorandax, known for his cybernetic enhancements and decades of service, opened the proceedings by stating the committee's purpose. For separate military engagements involving human populations have ended in catastrophic losses for the aggressors. We are here to determine how and why these outcomes occurred. They turned to Admiral Exer, a multi-eyed alien who oversaw the combined fleet command. Exer recounted, with sobering detail, the footage from each battlefield. None of these were standard military forces, he emphasized, and yet the outcomes were consistent. The humans adapted faster than our forces could recalibrate, employing improvised tactics that we normally wouldn't expect from civilians. They exploited environmental factors, used outdated but reliable weapons, and inflicted losses far exceeding our risk models. Senator Cassax again voiced her skepticism. These are just anomalies, unfortunate coincidences. Or perhaps the humans we encountered had paramilitary backgrounds. Marshal Dax shook his head. We've combed through the data. They are random cross-sections of Earth's population. Retirees, mechanics, hunters, engineers, medics, station custodians, even tourists. Hardly the profile of an organized fighting force. Yet they respond with uncanny coordination. Admiral Cole, a translucent-skinned figure whose bioluminescent patterns revealed her anxiety, added, and we have evidence they maintain archaic weaponry alongside advanced prototypes. Some of these ballistic firearms wouldn't be out of place centuries ago, yet they remain potent because of Earth's obsession with personal weapons. Any attempt to jam energy-based systems doesn't hamper chemical-propelled bullets. Electromagnetic pulses, which would disable half our technology, mean little to a simple mechanical firing pin. General Thorne, known for his species' subtle pheromone-based communication, said in a low voice, they have also proven adept at sabotage. When the Vexgar infiltration team cut power in Delta 9, the humans switched to older backups they kept around just in case. They essentially have entire layers of technology that look obsolete to us, but function if the modern systems fail. Then came the revelation from Jella Navarro. She had been granted special permission to speak as an outside expert. Summarizing her earlier findings, she addressed the committee with calm authority. Humans appear to have normalized conflict training in everyday life. Much of their entertainment revolves around scenarios in which small groups overcome stronger forces through creativity and grit. Even non-soldiers have internalized fundamental combat strategies. As a species, they have endured repeated wars and calamities, some self-inflicted, some environmental. Their cultural memory is full of adversity. This fosters an intrinsic mindset that any individual might need to defend themselves, their home, or their communities at a moment's notice. The hush that followed was profound. The thought of entire populations, psychologically primed for guerrilla warfare, was unsettling. When a typical species reached a certain stage of technological maturity, they tended to unify and reduce internal strife. The assumption that advanced species would be more peaceful was woven into galactic doctrine. But humans had discovered faster-than-light travel while still fragmented into multiple nation-states and alliances. Instead of discarding conflict, they had woven it into their collective identity. Admiral Exer opened a new hologram feed, a collage of human sports like paintball and airsoft. Here, they simulate battles for recreation. They practice flanking maneuvers, sniping, infiltration, all in the name of fun. They do this from childhood onward, building neural pathways for real combat. Even Senator Krex, who had been staunchly confident in the Senate's conventional approach, looked troubled. So are you telling me that in a real invasion scenario, the the humans' entire population might function as an army. Marshall Dax's face hardened. That's exactly the possibility. While other species rely on specialized military castes, humans have universalized warfare knowledge. Even if you dismantle their central command, you face pockets of civilian resistance, each group capable of building traps, explosives, and alternative communication lines. They have thousands of distinct martial traditions, gleaned from centuries of internal conflicts across different continents. It's a mosaic of battle philosophies that no single standardized alien army can easily predict or neutralize. The Strategic AI Advisor, a pulsing orb of light identified as Omega, joined the conversation. Its synthesized voice radiated in the chamber. Analysis of all available data concludes that humans, if provoked to total war, will not adhere to the typical constraints we see in interstellar conflicts. Their aggression can escalate dramatically, involving every sector of their society. Casualties on both sides would be extraordinarily high, with no guaranteed victory for the aggressor. Recommendation: reconsider Earth's classification and pursue diplomatic engagement. Protests rippled among the delegates. The notion of granting Earth, with its rudimentary FTL capabilities, an elevated classification up to level 5 or beyond seemed radical. Yet the more the experts reviewed the combat footage, the more sense it made. Class 5 designations were normally reserved for civilizations that possessed advanced weaponry and a far-reaching star empire. Earth might not have the technology, but they had the intangible factor of a population ready to fight like special forces when pressed. The session ended with an announcement by Chancellor Nocturne, a tall figure with deep-set black eyes and a resonant baritone. He declared, "A vote to reclassify Earth to level 5 will be held in 3 standard cycles. In the interim, the Senate strongly advises all member worlds to exercise restraint in any dealings with humans." Such a statement was nearly unprecedented. Word spread across the galaxy in hours, accompanied by frantic speculation. Some factions believed the Senate had lost its nerve, while others insisted Earth was a ticking time bomb that needed containment. The Crimson Talon mercenaries and the Krovac Dominion licked their wounds, uncertain how best to restore their reputations. The Vexcar, furious at their defeat aboard Delta 9, hesitated to launch a follow-up attack. At the same time, Earth itself buzzed with only partial awareness of what was going on. Most humans had no idea their everyday hobbies and fierce independence were causing panic among alien powers. Meanwhile, in a private observation gallery adjoining the Senate Hall, Chancellor Nocturne crossed paths with cultural analyst Ferris, one of the few humans who actually held a staff position within the Senate's research departments. Ferris was a scholarly type, arguably the best translator and ethnographer of human culture the Senate had on payroll. She wore a conservative suit, her posture betraying a subtle tension that many recognized as typical human wariness. Nocturne regarded her with curiosity and a measure of caution. "You overheard the debate," Nocturne said in a low voice, glancing around to ensure no other delegates were near. "You must realize that your people have stirred a hornet's nest of anxiety." Ferris inclined her head. "Yes, Chancellor, I'm aware. Though I suspect few in the Senate grasp the deeper truth." Nocturne's brows lifted. "Which is that in many human societies, civilian use of force is heavily regulated by law and cultural norms. However, our official military forces are also bound by strict rules of engagement that limit how and when they can utilize lethal measures. Civilians, by contrast, are not always held to the same standard in a crisis. When threatened, they can adopt a mindset of no holds barred, especially if they believe their survival or their family survival is at stake. And, ironically, our professional soldiers often hold back due to codes of conduct that value minimizing collateral damage. Civilians, if cornered, might not hold back at all." Nocturne let out a breath. "That might be even more terrifying than what we've presented to the committee. The official line is that Earth soldiers are formidable enough to imply that their unregulated populace might surpass even that. The Senate would recoil in fear." Ferris offered a small, somber smile. Sometimes fear is the correct response if it prevents foolish hostilities. Still, the Senate needs the truth sooner or later. Especially now, with this upcoming vote to shift Earth to a Level 5 classification. I can only do so much at once, Nocturne said. If we told them everything, we'd risk a panic. There might be calls for preemptive strikes. You humans have a phrase, I believe, that an animal is most dangerous when cornered with nothing to lose. Would that apply to your species as a whole? Ferris gave a single nod. Historically, yes. More than once, when human societies felt existentially threatened, they poured every resource into defense or retaliation. We have a concept called total war, in which even factories building civilian goods switch to producing weapons. Scientists of all disciplines turn their focus to new weaponry. Civilians become combatants in an instant. It's not pretty, but it's in our history. Nocturne paused, looking at her with new comprehension. Thank you for clarifying. At least one of your own stands in these halls, bridging the gap in understanding. As Ferris moved away, the Chancellor stared out the wide window, overlooking a sky filled with starships of innumerable designs. He tried to imagine what it would mean if Earth ever unleashed its entire population, each armed with the same cunning and improvisational drive glimpsed so far. The image chilled him to his core. Amid such turmoil, the Senate's Military Affairs Committee scrambled for more details. Another hearing took place, focusing on the events at Proxima Colony, a newly settled outpost. Originally, the Vector Dominion, which specialized in swift urban pacification, attempted to seize control. The Dominion expected to crush local resistance using well-honed methods that had subdued rebellious populations on other worlds. But the colonists on Proxima, mostly humans, had studied centuries of Earth history, from organized crime tactics to insurgent warfare. They combined the two in ways that flummoxed the Vector troops. When typical Dominion tactics like area denial or shock and awe bombings were deployed, the humans vanished into labyrinthine substructures, only to reappear behind lines. They jammed the Dominion's transmissions with archaic frequencies. They melted circuit boards by rigging cooling vents to vent scorching steam directly onto Dominion equipment. They sabotaged supply routes with homemade explosives. In short, they bled the invasion force dry, forcing a humiliating retreat. By the time of the next Senate Assembly, the phrase human anomaly had spread to every corner of the galaxy. Allies, neutrals, and even enemies of Earth's old alliances wanted to know how to proceed. The data, compiled painstakingly by Director Vaznik and his team, arrived in a mammoth dossier. For separate engagements, from the Pride of Cantor fiasco to Anchorage, Delta 9, and Proxima Colony, each ending in humiliating failure for technologically advanced foes. With every reading, more senators grew convinced that Earth had to be reclassified, if only to quell further rash attacks that might trigger a galactic-scale disaster. Thus, on the designated day, the entire Senate convened for the formal session. The space thrummed with tense anticipation. Chancellor Nocturne took the podium. Holograms of Earth loomed overhead, an iconic blue sphere turning slowly against a black cosmic canvas. Honorable delegates, Nocturne began, his voice carrying effortlessly, we come together to finalize our stance on the so-called human anomaly. The evidence is irrefutable. Repeated attempts to conquer or coerce Earth or its offshoot settlements have ended in catastrophic losses, often at the hands of non-professional fighters. Our investigations reveal a species uniquely prepared for conflict, not merely by military forces, but across the entire civilian population. While their technology remains below the standards of a typical Class 5 civilization, their capacity for adaptation, improvisation, and psychological warfare meets or exceeds that threshold. Therefore, this body must decide whether to elevate Earth to Level 5 classification. He paused, scanning the ring of delegates. We must also decide how to engage with humanity moving forward, be it through direct diplomacy, continued containment, or other means. I opened the floor. The ensuing debate was electric. Some delegates argued for immediate containment, insisting the humans' readiness for violence made them a threat to galactic peace. They pointed to Earth's fractious historical record, claiming that if humans couldn't stop fighting each other for millennia, how could they coexist peacefully with the galaxy at large? Others argued that Earth's violent past made them survivors, but not necessarily expansionists or conquerors. They posited that forging alliances with such a resilient species would be beneficial, especially if Earth's technology advanced in the near future. Admiral Exer took a turn to address the Senate. It's crucial to note that every time humans encounter superior technology, they analyze it and often replicate or counter it with surprising speed. We do not want to be in a position where our military miscalculations drive Earth to accelerate its arms development. We believe cooperation is the wiser path. Senator Kassak scowled, retorting, "Cooperation with a dangerously unpredictable species? Should we trust them not to turn on us once they glean our secrets?" Cultural analyst Ferris, who rarely spoke before such a large body, stepped forward bravely. "Yes, humans have a violent history, but we also value friendships, alliances, and mutual defense. We can be fiercely loyal. The majority of these incidents you cite, Krovac, Crimson Talon, Vexscar, were unprovoked raids or attacks initiated by others. The human defenders fought back only when threatened. If you come in peace, I believe you will find Earth quite open to sharing knowledge and culture." A wave of speculation swept through the chamber. Ferris continued, "However, I must emphasize, if humans feel existentially threatened, they will not hesitate to mobilize at every level of society. That is not a policy or a government directive. It's an ingrained cultural trait. And once that mobilization starts, it is nearly impossible to stop." Maashal Dux nodded grimly. "That is why we strongly advocate the approach of cautious diplomacy. Elevate Earth to level 5, recognize their sovereignty over their colonies, and discourage any further attempts at conquest. If we do otherwise, we will inevitably face more fiascos and risk pushing humanity into a total war scenario that the galaxy is ill-prepared to handle." Discussions ran longer than anyone anticipated, with some delegates unveiling their own private intelligence. The more they revealed, the clearer it became that Earth's intangible advantage was precisely that intangible, the human psyche. Their entire culture brimmed with combat narratives and an almost casual approach to improvised violence, tempered by an equally powerful sense of loyalty to allies and neighbors. When the final arguments died away, Chancellor Nocturne called for the vote. A hush descended. The electronic tally flickered overhead, a swirl of lights indicating each delegate's decision. After a tense minute, the result became clear. A strong majority voted in favor of acknowledging Earth as a level 5 civilization, albeit an unconventional one, and pursuing diplomatic relations as equal partners rather than subjugation. The minority dissent included species that feared Earth's unpredictability, but even they recognized that further direct assaults would prove self-defeating. When the results were announced, relief and apprehension mingled in the chamber's air. Chancellor Nocturne solemnly declared, "Henceforth, Earth is reclassified as a level 5 civilization. We call upon all Senate members to respect their territorial sovereignty and engage diplomatically. Let us strive for cooperation to ensure stability across the galaxy." As the delegates dispersed, Admiral Exer and Marshal Dax found themselves together in a quiet corridor. "We've averted an all-out war for now," Exer said, multiple eyes blinking in slow sequence. Dax folded his arms over his chest. "Let's just hope no rogue factions decide to test the new status anyway. Humans can be friendly if approached on respectful terms, but the moment they sense betrayal, well, we've seen the consequences." Meanwhile, Director Vaznik compiled the final version of his threat assessment report, labeled Priority Alpha, for internal Senate records. It recounted every engagement in thorough detail, highlighting how cunning, resourcefulness, and a lifetime of casual combat training could outmatch better-equipped but predictably trained alien troops. He concluded with a note of caution. The unstoppable factor is not technology, but culture. That is what sets Earth apart. Far below the Senate Hall, in a labyrinth of secure briefing rooms, Chancellor Nocturne and Ferris met one more time. The Chancellor looked weary, but some measure of relief shaped his posture. "The vote is done. Your people are recognized as equals," he said. "I hope this fosters the best in humanity, cooperation rather than conflict." Ferris pressed her lips together. "Most humans don't even know how close we were to an interstellar crisis, Chancellor. They continue their day-to-day lives, playing games, working, going on vacations. If they knew how many alien forces had tried and failed to conquer them, perhaps they would rest easier, or perhaps they would only redouble their readiness." Nocturne exhaled a low breath. "We made the right choice, but it remains a gamble. If, in the future, humanity's fractious nature leads to a more aggressive faction seeking dominance, the entire galaxy could be threatened." Ferris offered a tight smile. "Civilizations can change. Ours is young in interstellar terms. Contact with advanced species might speed our unity. Your Senate's acceptance could pave the way for trade, cultural exchange, maybe even an end to the ongoing fragmentation we see on Earth. In time, we may become less prone to conflict, or we may adapt in other ways." The Chancellor caught that subtle twist in her words and realized how complicated Earth's destiny might become. Already, many new pathways had opened, some leading to positive growth, others perhaps to escalation of arms if distrust flared on either side. For now, though, a sense of guarded optimism settled. The diplomatic approach took precedence over aggression. The Senate transmitted official envoys to Earth to open channels of communication, offering membership terms, research exchanges, and mutual non-aggression pacts. The Terran governments, despite their lingering rivalries, joined forces under a newly formed council to manage these unprecedented negotiations. Rumors spread that certain Terran industries were eager to glean alien technology, while some interstellar firms wanted to learn from Earth's unique culture of rugged independence and unstoppable adaptability. In less official circles, news of these off-world fiascos slowly trickled to the human populace, feeding conspiracy theories that had existed for decades. Some regarded the whole thing as a hoax, while others took pride in hearing that their retired mechanics and cabin-dwelling hunters had chased off advanced alien troopers. A particular video clip of an old man brandishing a battered revolver and calling an alien officer son went viral on Earth's networks, spawning countless memes. While the details were as yet unconfirmed by Earth's governments, the moral of the story was clear enough to everyday folks. Never underestimate an old-timer with a few decades of improvised problem-solving experience behind him. All across the galaxy, other species reconfigured their strategies. The Crimson Talon mercenaries tried to rebrand themselves, bragging that they only lost because of the environment, but few believed their spin. The Krovac Dominion lobbied for heavier oversight of Earth's shipping lanes, but the Senate now firmly insisted on a more diplomatic approach. The Vexcar Dominion, still humiliated by the Delta 9 fiasco, licked its wounds quietly, uncertain how to proceed in the face of the new Senate consensus. Back at the Senate Hall, a day after the historic vote, a short ceremony was held to formally acknowledge Earth's new status. It was a subdued affair by typical galactic standards, no grand parade or flamboyant display. Instead, Ambassador Krell of the Arcturian hegemony delivered a concise speech. "We stand at a crossroads of galactic politics. The success or failure of this new partnership may define our era. Let us respect Earth's capabilities and invite them to share their innovations and knowledge, so that we might grow together." Official translators rendered his words into multiple Earth languages for the small human delegation that was present, though some delegates, like Ferris, already spoke fluent Standard. The tension in the air was undeniable, but overshadowed by the sense that, at least for now, the galaxy had sidestepped open warfare. In the coming months, no one forgot the sobering footage that first prompted this sea change in perspective. Whenever fresh rumors surfaced of some backwater Earth settlement driving off well-equipped pirates, or of random tourists capturing a smuggler's ship, the entire Senate shivered. They realized with each new account just how prevalent these stories were, each reinforcing the impression that humans simply never let their guard down. The official line became, "We must cooperate," a phrase that found its way into every new treaty proposal with Earth. Some whispered behind closed doors that perhaps the Senate's reclassification had come too late, that Earth already had gleaned critical insights about interstellar warfare from their repeated brushes with advanced technology. Others believed Earth's inherent fractiousness would prevent them from expanding too aggressively. Time would reveal which assumption was more accurate. Meanwhile, on Earth itself, life went on. Snow fell in Alaska, and local hunters continued their routines, perhaps with a bit more swagger. Mechanics in small-town garages closed up shop at the end of the day, aware of the possibility that next time someone needed a fix, it might be for a warp-capable vessel. Retired engineers reminisced about the day they took down marauding aliens with little more than cunning and elbow grease. Folks on cruises occasionally joked among themselves, "We'd better pack extra ammo, just in case." And always in the background of daily life, humans kept their games, their stories, their die-hard mentality. They kept practicing for doomsday scenarios that might never come, honing reflexes in paintball fields, learning new combat tricks from video games, or reading about historical battles from thousands of years prior. Whether they realized it or not, they were forging the next generation of unstoppable improvised defenders, ready to greet any future threat with cunning and resilience. Such was the state of affairs when the galaxy finally arrived at the unimaginable threshold, recognizing a backwater Level 2 society as Level 5 purely because its populace had proven lethal beyond measure. A quiet sense of awe spread among those well-informed enough to see the bigger picture. For the first time in eons, a technologically inferior people had forced the galaxy's powers to rewrite the rules of classification. How that revision would transform the future remained to be seen. But there was no denying that the humans, so often underestimated, had left an indelible mark on interstellar politics. In private circles of the Senate, rumors circulated of new military doctrines emerging in response to the human threat. There was talk of specialized anti-guerrilla units or infiltration tactics that might circumvent Earth's improvised defenses. Analysts, however, uniformly cautioned that humans were famously unpredictable. They had a knack for turning their own vulnerabilities into strengths. By the time an invader came prepared for one trick, the humans would have devised another. And that, in the end, was the reason the Senate collectively realized Earth's civilians often had higher kill counts than professional alien forces. It was not advanced weaponry, nor was it a deliberate conspiracy. Rather, it was the fundamental cultural tapestry of a species that accepted adversity, turned survival into games, wove combat knowledge into everyday pastimes, and approached each crisis with the unstoppable question, how do we make this work? Right here, right now. They were a population conditioned to fight as if their very lives depended on it. So, while the Senate wrestled with the ramifications of acknowledging Earth at a level that belied its technology, one fact stood above all else. Earth, for better or worse, was no longer a minor footnote on the galactic stage. The old method of ranking civilizations had never accounted for such raw, distributed potential. No matter how uneasy this truth made everyone, it had to be faced head-on. Earth was a new kind of power, anchored less by starships and more by everyday humans who saw the world, indeed, the universe, through the lens of endless possibility. If that lens often took the shape of a scope aimed at an unsuspecting foe, well, the galaxy could only adapt or suffer the consequences. And so the story ended for the time being, poised on the cusp of a grand and uncertain future. Earth, reclassified and recognized, was free to chart a path forward in a universe that had just awakened, perhaps too late, to the profound significance of a civilization that made warfare a collective pastime. Whether that path led to peaceful partnership or future wars would depend on all parties involved. But none could deny that the potential for destruction and for collaboration was immense. That day, the Senate left the chamber with minds full of uneasy wonder, reflecting upon how a handful of resourceful retirees, hunters, engineers, and hobbyists had forever altered galactic politics.